Huzzah! Hi! Hello friends! I am here today with Barbara Paisendorfer of Royal Black Couture. Barbara is a trained tailor. She's also a couture corset maker. Can I call you that?
Bespoke couture costumes and corsets.
Yeah, why don't you just introduce yourself?
I don't know.
Okay, so Barbara is a amazing person who sews things, like couture level, master tailor level sewing. So I know I get a lot of questions on my channel about pad stitching because I have done pad stitching on my channel in a lot of the tailored garments that I've been experimenting with. I, of course, am not a trained tailor. By the way, I'm just sort of flailing. For some reason, I have just never managed to actually fully explain how to pad stitch in actual detail and why we pad stitch, how you handle stuff whilst you pad stitch, because it's not so much the stitch as the actual technique of fabric manipulation that is what's important.
Yeah, it's a technique that I would use to shape all the parts of tailored garments that need structure, like collars, lapels, everything that needs strength and reinforcement. This is a lovely wool fabric and it's very soft. It just flaps down like this. But here, if you look at the pad stitched wool, it has a lot more stand and stiffness.
So it's for collars, it's for lapels, it's for the front shaped areas of jackets, areas that need not only an additional bit of strength, but also shape, right?
Yeah.
Because what pad stitching does is it secures a strength layer, which is this. What is this?
Okay.
What is this layer?
You will need some kind of material that you pad stitch to your outer fabric, which usually is some kind of wool. And the inner layer is canvas. In the traditional case, it's mostly horsehair canvas.
So if you're looking for this, it's horsehair tailor's canvas? Is that what you would call it?
I only know the name horsehair canvas.
Okay, horsehair canvas.
What it actually means, in these canvases, the weft threads are...
Which is the ones that go... Because the selvage is the warp. The threads that run parallel to where the edge that has been cut from the bolt of the fabric, not the selvage edge. That is the warp.
Yeah.
Go on.
So if you look at the canvas, the weft threads are usually horsehair, which makes it very stiff and very solid.
Oh, I see, left to right.
Yeah, and the warp threads are often made from something softer. It could be cotton, it could be some softer fiber of animal hair. So if you look at this, it's very soft in this direction, but it's quite stiff in this direction. That quality is something we will use in pad stitching to shape the garment in a way we want it. For the front of a jacket, for example, you would use the horsehair canvas like this. This is the selvage. So it's soft for when you are bending or moving the body, but it's very stiff in the other direction to keep the round shape we want to create over the chest.
Yeah, and also to give the lapel
that roll.
Yeah, that roll.
This is an undercollar. In this example, I have done connecting seams at the center back because I want both sides of the canvas to be on the bias. So it rolls over the curve of the body. So the grain is diagonal to the center front, so it makes a V shape. Also, the outer fabric of the undercollar has a seam in the center back, and it's also cut on the bias.
So that allows the collar, because the collar has to curve around?
Yeah, it has to curve around the neck. But then the upper part of the collar you would cut on the straight grain.
Oh, okay.
In most cases. So it has the soft bias quality underneath to shape.
I see.
That creates the base for the top part.
Great, and then you don't get a seam down the middle of the
in the
upper
under
part of the collar.
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to end up with, right?
Yes, that is the end result, which is a lovely pad stitched undercollar. And you can see it has a lot of shape, which is not only created by pad stitching but also by pressing.
Right. Okay, so it's this. This isn't a seam. This is one piece of fabric that has gone from this flat thing to this thing that absolutely does not want to sit flat.
Yeah.
And this is what's going to allow it to shape around the neck of the jacket. This also works for lapels because you know when you do the pad stitching, the lapel will want to just fold back on itself.
Yeah.
Instead of just laying flat, wanting to flop forward.
Yeah, one of the main purposes of pad stitching is to work shape into parts of the garment. You do that by stitching the layers together in the shape you want it to have later. So you work the shape into the two layers and it can't undo the shape afterwards because it's invisibly connected by all the stitching.
Yeah, because if you want to go into the physics of it, like when one piece of fabric curves around and another piece of fabric curves around over top of that, this one has larger surface area and this one has smaller surface area. So you are stitching, the stitches aren't going to go into the same place of the fabric, if that, I'm so not explaining this well. If you have flat fabric and flat fabric and stitch them like this, the fabric is stitched to this piece and this piece in the same place. If you have fabric, see, it moves ever so... This is like the worst demonstration in the history of the world, but all of a sudden, this point of the fabric...
Should we try it with fabric actually?
Yes, please.
What we want to create, if this is for example a lapel, is a shape that is going towards the body. We don't want to stick the points of the lapel to the outside. We want it to lie flat against the chest and stay there. So we want to curve the fabric underneath towards the body, and we do that by pad stitching the layers in this curved shape. The under layer, the wool layer, is a bit smaller than the outer layer. That shape will stay in the garment thanks to the pad stitching.
So it won't want to lay flat anymore.
Yeah.
It will want to stay in this curved position because that's how it was stitched.
So what I have here is the starting point of this piece. It's the undercollar with the center back seam already closed, and I have prepared this horsehair canvas top layer, which I then would put on top. And the first thing I would do with an undercollar is basting the line where the collar folds.
Oh, okay.
Because that needs to stay in place. And from this basted line, I would work away in one direction and towards the neck in the other direction. It's a good idea to pin it in place first. I would go for the center back and then just secure it in a few areas, checking the marking of the folded line on the fabric underneath.
Out of curiosity, how do you find this line? Is this kind of arbitrary or?
It's on my pattern. I have the folding line, which I already created in pattern drafting.
Okay.
You can also have this part of the collar, which I don't know how it's called in English, much higher, so you could have
Oh, I see.
even.
Oh, so this is the height of the stand.
Stand. Thank you.
Good.
This is the
Got it.
height of the stand.
Or how high you want the collar to stand up against the neck.
Yeah. So you could also create a collar with 5 centimeters of stand.
I see.
Then
So
this part also has to be longer. But this is just a very standard business suit collar with 2 centimeters of stand.
And presumably you work all of this out in the mock-up and figure out if it's sitting right and everything.
I draft this on the paper because I create all my patterns drafted flat on paper, and there are all these German formulas for figuring out exactly how high it has
So maybe another day we'll get into pattern drafting with Barbara, but this seems like a complex topic that's not happening today.
So I would just transfer this folding line onto the wool, and I would mark it on the canvas as well. In general, I do leave a generous amount of seam allowance here on the canvas because through the rolling and shaping, the layers will shift, and we don't want to end up with pieces that are too small, so the lines will change a bit during work. That's why I left so much seam allowance.
I see, because when you roll the, I have run into that before, and that I'm like, wait a minute, now my seam allowance is like right on the edge because the fabric does shift a bit.
Yeah, if we look at the finished piece, you can see that the initial line of the canvas was here, whereas the initial line on the wool is here. So we worked about 0.5 centimeter of ease into the top layer, and I had to slightly change the lines on the canvas here. If you have a lot of time, you can do a small backstitch like I have done here. But if you want to go a bit faster, you can also do a running stitch along the line. One of the most important parts of pad stitching is that you only should catch the upper layer and the tiniest bit of the wool underneath, because you don't want the stitches to show on the back side.
Right.
The back side should look as if there is no stitching at all. Of course, it works better with heavier fabrics.
Yeah.
If you have very lightweight suiting fabric, it will be very difficult to only catch one thread.
But it is the undercolor, so it's not seen.
You don't see it from the outside, but if you would do it on the chest, then you definitely would see the stitches, so you have to be careful. And it might take a bit of practice to figure out how to stitch so you catch only the thread, but not stitch through the whole outer layer. Then I'll take my tailor's thimble. Please use thimbles to save your fingers. And then I would start with the running stitch or back stitch from right side to left side along the marked line. The line where you would fold the collar is secured, if possible without any visible stitches on the undercollar. And now we are always starting from the center back to the side, because what we want to do, we want the lapel to roll towards your chest. And that is the shape we want to work into the collar. So we are starting from the center back and working towards the point of the collar here. Underneath the fold, we want this part to shape towards the body. We would work in this direction, folding the layers away from the basted line. I always start with the upper collar. I would start working at the center back, directly at the basted line, and then work myself diagonal rows towards the point of the lapel. And while I'm doing that, I would shape the layers over my hand. I would hold my finger like this and then shape the layers. I would start here at the top. I'm working top to bottom, then go bottom to top. So I would work in diagonal rows towards the outer side. It's important to catch only a small bit of the wool fabric underneath, and I find the finger underneath helpful because you can feel the needle. If you feel the needle, you have to stitch a bit lighter. You might prick yourself a few times when you practice. But it is helpful because then you don't get too deep through the fabric. The pad stitch has this V shape, which is created by stitching down on one row and then stitching up on the other row, and you have a lot of thread on the top, and then you stitch underneath the fabric, catching just the tiniest thread of the wool underneath.
Well, it does go through to the wool, but it just doesn't show as much as possible.
And while doing this, you would always roll it over your finger in the direction you want to shape the whole garment. So if this would be a collar and I wanted to shape it towards the body, I would hold it like this, which is a bit awkward. That helps to shape the layers in the desired shape.
Yes.
God. You would move from one side to the other, always rolling the layers over your finger to keep forming it as desired. Use the thimble, as you can see here, to push the needle through. And then you have this diagonal stitch here, and you would move down to the next stitch, again trying to catch one thread underneath. And as you can see, it shapes these V's because I check where this stitch goes in, and this is where I would start the next one, and then just going straight across.
So the needle is moving horizontally, but
yes,
physically you're moving the stitch vertically.
Okay, so now you have reached the bottom of this row, and I would just do the tiniest back stitch and get to the other side because you want the V's to go into this direction and the stitches. So I need to start on the left side now.
So has that gone under to the right side of the fabric? Or is that just,
yes,
that stitch is sitting in between the two layers?
I still caught the tiniest thread underneath. If you look closely, you can see the tiniest thread here. Again, I try to catch as little as possible of the wool underneath. Now I would stitch from top to bottom, mirroring the stitches that I have done, rolling it over the finger, trying to catch only the smallest thread of wool on the underside. Here you can see again, the needle is here, but I would only catch the smallest thread so you don't have a visible stitch on the underside. Takes quite a while to do pad stitching, but I find it's a very soothing and relaxing task.
Oh, I love it.
I really enjoy hand sew.
Yay!
So that's the perfect thing to do while watching YouTube videos or listening to podcasts. I think it's just a very beautiful craft.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm also biased.
It's definitely taking 10 times as long as just fusing some kind of modern interfacing onto the...
But the results are so worth it.
Yeah, because you work the shape into the garment, which you obviously can't do when just fusing layers flat onto each other.
Oh, wow.
At the piece flat on the table. You can see that we have this bulge to the outside and we have worked this shape into the materials because we rolled it over the finger.
Right.
And the upper layer is bigger now. It's pulling the wool fabric underneath into this curve, which is the effect we want to have. What you still have to do afterwards, or what you should do, is pressing, because if you pad stitch a big area, it might be quite wonky and wobbly from all the handling. But what you can do afterwards is pressing it flat again. The shape will still be in the piece. It will be very smooth. You don't have any unevenness on the outside. You don't have to worry about losing the shape because it's still worked into the garment. The threads, before pressing it, it didn't have this prominent fold and it wasn't as flat. It was very uneven and wonky and it was dramatically curved like this. But I did press it flat to just make the layers even and to get rid of any lumps and bumps. Then I steamed it and formed it into the desired shape afterwards. If you let it cool off in a curved position, then it reinforces the shape again. The collar is more prone to roll inwards. It doesn't have the unevenness of handling it in it anymore. You can see that here the fabric is wider.
Oh, I see, yeah, it's
rolls
rippling
a bit. And that is because I gently stretched it into this round shape, and that helps get this shape.
Helps to give it this curve that it needs to go around the neck. After
I finished the pad stitching, there is a lot of pressing and shaping work you can do with the iron, but that is another topic for an entire video.
Stay tuned for an entire feature on pressing. I mean, this could go on and on and on. There's so many techniques.
Yes, I pressed a quite visible sharp curve into this end part. This area of the collar should lie really flat against the chest. It shouldn't be super round. Here's a quite sharp crease where the collar folds. Yeah. So that is why I would just press this small area quite flat, not flat, but I would steam it here and flatten it more. If you compare it with this area, this is way more rounded than this flattened part here. Once I have done all the pad stitching, I would remove the excess seam allowance around the collar, following the marked shape of the wool, because if the canvas is going into the seam allowance, you will have a really hard time pressing the edge of the collar.
Oh yeah, getting it to sit flat.
So the canvas only should be on the inside of the collar, but not in the seam allowance, because now you can press this very flat without the stiff horsehair being in the way. It will make a very sharp and crisp edge. There are multiple techniques to achieve all the shapes in tailoring, and pad stitching is only one. But I hope this little demo has...
Yeah, I mean, even just implementing this one technique is going to way improve your tailoring attempts.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 can confirm. That is the art of pad stitching, briefly. I hope that was useful to you. I hope that makes the previous videos that I have done actually make sense, because I have never actually explained this. So thank you, Barbara, for joining us.
Well,
and
thank you for having
actually
me.
explaining this properly. I actually learned some stuff.
That is awesome.
I need to go redo all of my pad stitching ever now.
No, you don't. I'm watching out if I can spot it in future videos.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay, so now I have to like go back and rewatch this video before I do any future pads. If you want to see some more of Barbara, you can follow her at Royal Black Couture on Instagram. Her work is mind-blowingly amazing. Barbara also has a Patreon account in which she regularly publishes tutorials for, is it mostly corsetry?
It's a mix. I do corset making techniques, but also beginner-friendly things like I have a very popular one about making simple and easy skirts that look great in photo shoots. Basic techniques like lace applique or creating texture.
Okay, so loads of really cool techniques for couture sewing and tailoring. And how to make like really beautiful garments, costumes, and clothing. And
yeah.
I will put a link to that down below as well if you would like to go and check out that. Otherwise, happy pad stitching. I hope this improves your garments.
I hope you found it helpful and inspiring to give it a try yourself. Even if you don't want to use it for a garment, it's a very relaxing task to just
take
practice.
some pad stitching on the train and just like do your pad stitching. Why not? The worst is like trying to figure out how to like end a video cohesively.
So it's not
just cut it there and it'll be fine. We'll have an awkward ending. I will warn you, when the camera's on, this is the worst stitching you will ever do in your entire life.
I can imagine. When you want to appear professional and life happens here towards the front.
Oh.